Chapter 28. Siddle. She lowered her head, struggling with the head in her hand in silence. Her face was full of scars, her skin was wrinkled, her eyes were narrowed like threads, her mouth was open, revealing her sparse teeth. On her snow-white face, her blue eyes were wide open and staring. The ferocious head chuckled, satisfied as she listened to Siddle mumble to herself, "This is indeed a bad dream." But before it could make its next move, it heard the girl's cold and pained voice. "Why did I dream of something so ugly?" The words clearly expressed her hatred. Freddy's head. What Siddle said was the truth. It could be said that she was currently looking at the head in her hand with a miserable expression. This head was really too ugly, and to say it was ugly was still an understatement. She would rather fight hundreds of Esthers in her dream than come into contact with something that looked like this. Just thinking about the fact that she would have to see Freddy in her dreams in the future, Siddle. She was very resistant to this from the bottom of her heart. She had been doing good deeds all her life, how could she dream of something so ugly? Siddle quietly put down the head in her hand, looked into the mirror and hypnotized herself. This is just a dream. There can't be such an ugly thing in this world. She hypnotized herself with strong resistance, seeing Freddy's head disappear in the mirror with a look of fear, anger, and unwillingness. Before disappearing, it seemed like he wanted to stretch his neck to look at his clawed gloves placed on the ground. Siddle. Is that all? Siddle calmly picked up the crowbar. She had originally gone to the bathroom to carefully examine the two things she had brought out from Louise's dream. The crowbar was so dirty that Siddle couldn't help but frown, and picked up the bottle of detergent to clean the stains on it. After the rust layer was washed away, the black layer inside was revealed. Now, even if she washed the slightly large leather glove, it wouldn't be clean in a moment. Siddle thought for a moment, then brought it and the crowbar back to the room. Siddle thought for a moment, then carried it and the crowbar back to the room, opened the suitcase, and pressed the two things down at the bottom. Louise on the bed seemed to have fallen asleep again. After finishing everything, Siddle yawned lazily and went to bed. A good night's sleep. Waking up the next morning, the warm summer sunlight was shining through the window on the light blue desk. Louise's little head was leaning on Siddle's shoulder, she was sleeping soundly, on her rosy white face, the thin layer of down under the sunlight revealed a pale yellow color. It wasn't that Siddle wanted to wake her up. But her shoulder was really numb. After being absent-minded for a while, Siddle carefully placed Louise's head on the pillow. Not knowing whether this little girl had been tormented by nightmares for too long, but she slept so soundly today, Siddle decided to let her have a good night's sleep. She rolled over and got out of bed, brushed her teeth and washed her face in the bathroom, then went downstairs, just in time to meet Janet, who was preparing breakfast. The woman was wearing a crimson off-shoulder dress, elegantly placing fried bacon and meat slices on the table, smiling happily at Siddle. "Good morning, honey." Janet seemed to be very good at socializing, or perhaps it could be said that this woman was very enthusiastic. "Yesterday, I finished everything," she toasted bread and chatted with Siddle with a smile. "I want to play with the kids. Is Louise still sleeping? I wonder if she thinks I'm annoying or not." "Yes," Siddle thought for a moment, "I can see that he is very attached to you." She took the hot milk from Janet, hesitated for a moment. "Miss Janet, do you know a place called Elm Street?" Although Freddy had disappeared from Louise's dream, Siddle was still a little uneasy. She had a clue, she wanted to trace the source to see if there was a character like Freddy in real life. The woman's toaster paused for a moment, still smiling brightly. "Who did you hear about that place?" "Louise lived there when she was little," Janet said calmly, taking out the toast and handing it to Siddle. "The salad is on the table." "So do you know someone named Freddy?" Siddle didn't expect to be able to ask for a clue, her eyes suddenly lit up. After waking up, she searched the name Freddy online, but found nothing. "I know." Janet actually answered. She glanced at Siddle. "Is this also what Louise told you?" "No." Siddle thought for a second, remembered that Louise had forgotten about Freddy, and decided to change the explanation. "I had a dream." On Elm Street, there was a man named Freddie who made fun of children. Yes, unexpectedly, Janet gave an affirmative answer. She smiled calmly and replied, but now he can't hurt children anymore. Freddie is dead. Siddle. Wait, how does Louise's mother know so much? And she said it with such a calm face. Could it be that she knows the inside story? Siddle couldn't help but continue asking. He is. It seemed that Janet knew what Siddle wanted to ask, so she replied, he died 10 years ago, burned to death. Recalling Freddie's terrifying appearance in her dream, Siddle understood. That terrifying face was not his original appearance, those scars were all from burns. Janet sat down on the sofa, crossed her legs and took out a cigarette, her red lips slightly parted. Can I have a cigarette, kid? Siddle, I don't mind. She suddenly felt that Janet's attitude was a bit strange. Siddle hesitantly asked, what if Freddie isn't dead? Or it could be said that this man had become a wandering ghost in his dreams, continuing to search for his prey. He still has the ability to hurt others. Then she received a firm denial. How could that be? The woman with the strange red lips looked at her. You burned him to death with your own hands. Siddle. Siddle. Wait, did this beautiful woman with a calm and composed face say something terrible? Looking at your expression, do you know something? Janet squinted her eyes and smiled. You're different from Louise, she has a soft temperament, there are some things I don't dare tell her. But if you're willing to listen, she held a cigarette in her left hand, blew out a ring of smoke, and said indifferently, I can tell you. After receiving Siddle's nod, Janet slowly recounted, more than 10 years ago, I was still living on Elm Street. During that time, there were many missing child cases. As you know, honey, the police are very incompetent. They can't catch the criminals, but every day they have time to cooperate with the editors to push the blame on the newspapers. There were more than a dozen children missing at that time, she said with a troubled expression. While everyone was panicking and insecure, the kidnapper was caught. His name was Freddie. Janet lay lazily on the sofa, taking another puff of her cigarette. He was taken to the police station, then escaped again. The woman squinted as if trying to recall everything. He escaped to a repair shop, but you know, the law doesn't have the death penalty. If he could escape once, I can't believe those good-for-nothings can stop it from happening a second time. Janet pressed the cigarette butt into the glass ashtray and calmly said, so I said, it's no use locking him up, just burn him to death. Do you know? She smiled at Siddle. The public was very angry at that time, the couples with children were also very worried, not to mention the families of the victims. So after she said this, they surrounded the garage, some brought gasoline cans, some lit a fire. You know what happened next? Janet shrugged. I just said it, he was burned to death. Died right in front of me. Siddle. She looked at the elegant and beautiful Janet who was smoking, her mood was hard to describe. Siddle suddenly understood why Freddie came to find Louise. The child abuse was just one aspect, perhaps, his main purpose was to take revenge on the families who burned him to death at that time. However, Siddle did not think they had done anything wrong. The law could not punish those scumbags, which was exactly what she wanted. The result was obvious, there were many people involved in the incident, the law did not blame many people. Moreover, the person who was burned to death was a madman and was sentenced to life in prison. The law does not blame many people, meaning that the law cannot be enforced when everyone is a criminal. More specifically, it is only a certain action that is collective or widespread, even if that action contains an unreasonable and illegal element, the law is difficult to punish that action. Obviously, those who committed the act did not receive any punishment from the law. Siddle suddenly remembered that if Freddie could find Louise to take revenge, would he also go find the children of those families to do it? Is there a way to completely eliminate Freddie? Siddle thought for a moment and then tactfully said to Janet, what if Freddie comes back? She didn't know if Janet believed it or not. Sure enough, the woman looked at her with a strange look. Honey, Freddie is dead. No matter where you heard about this person, Janet looked at her coldly. Don't care, he died right in front of you. Siddle. I won't hide anything from you, I met him in your daughter's dream. She started to have a headache. I'm just saying, what if he turns into a spirit and comes back? Janet smiled, lazily replied, then kill him again. After all, she took a puff of her cigarette and calmly said, his bones are still in your basement. Siddle. She couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. Janet crossed her legs, and the tattoo on her shoulder could be vaguely seen. She smiled and said, after divorcing Louise's father, I started to work for myself. When something went wrong, I would go down to the basement and sit for a while. Then she would vent all her worries to Freddy's antics, such as scolding someone, then conveniently kicking him twice, etc. Siddle. Too brave. Now she could be sure that Louise was probably the first target Freddy would seek revenge on. This mother's behavior had already caused too much hatred. Siddle was silent for a few seconds. Can you show me that antics? You might not believe it if I tell you, Siddle said sincerely, I really saw Freddy in my dream, and he seemed to have a hostile attitude towards Louise. She just said it casually, not expecting Janet to actually believe it, then suddenly heard Janet laugh. Although I don't understand what you said, his bones mean nothing to me. The woman said calmly, as long as you're not afraid, let alone showing them to you, even if you grind his bones into ashes, I have no problem. Siddle couldn't help but ask curiously, don't you think what you said is very strange? Janet looked at her strangely. It's true that I feel like you're a strange child. But what does that have to do with me, she said, her beautiful face in the swirling smoke, calmly opening her mouth. If what you said is true, it doesn't matter if you crush Freddy's bones, as long as you can kick his soul back to hell. If you lie, I won't lose anything. Siddle finally happily reached an agreement with Janet. Janet could let her deal with the skeleton in the basement. Since Louise had forgotten about the nightmare, Siddle and Janet tacitly dropped the topic when they saw her coming down. After breakfast, Siddle took the basement key from Janet. But she didn't go down to the basement first, but went out first. Siddle didn't know how to get rid of Freddy, but if she acted a day later, another child might be harmed. So Siddle would go to a place, a very important place that she had discovered in Freddy's diary.